Now, I hope you can see my screen. I don't know why it is. Now, I hope now you can see my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. So today we are going to talk about the economic system. So that is where we were to do yesterday, but because of time, we were not able to continue. So today we are going to continue with the economic system. Hopefully we shall finish the economic system. Now, when we talk about economic system, we are talking about all items, including production, distribution, allocation of resources, all the farms, household, and everything within the economy. When we combine all those items together, we call them the economic system. So everything within the system is what is made up of an economic system. Now, this definition, if you can see it clearly here, that refers economic system describes the mechanism by which scarce resources are allocated in society, that is distribution, for both production and distribution, nature of the relationship between the individual and society, and the role of the government in allocation of resources, and the direction of economic activity. That one is correct. That one is the definition of the word economic system. So when we talk about economic system, we are trying to say refers to the mechanism by which scarce resources are allocated in the society. So that is the first thing. So it refers to the mechanism in which the scarce resources are allocated in a society for for both distribution and production, and it also shows the relationship between an individual, that an individual is an household, and a society. A society can be a farm, various farms, and so on, and the government in allocation of scarce resources. Now, you can also define it in this way. If this one is quite lengthy, you can say that it refers to the mechanism by which scarce resources are allocated in a society for both production and distribution, where we can see the nature of the relationship between the economic agents when it comes to allocation of resources. So when we talk about individual, society, and the government, those are the economic agents. So you can replace the word individual, society, and the government with economic agent. But in short, when we talk about production, distribution, and allocation of resources to various households and farms within the economy, we are talking about the system, so the economic system. So we can see this definition here. Let's go to this definition. I have another definition here we can use. Look at this definition. Look at that definition. Now, this definition consists of three items: production, distribution, and consumption. This one is the easiest definition of all. An economic system is a way in which a society organizes the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So that is also another definition you can use. So when we talk about distribution, production, and consumption of goods and services provided by the society or provided by the economic agents within the economy, we call it an economic system. So the society consists of many items. So society consists of the household, that is the individuals, consists of the farms, and it also consists of the government. So when you talk about a way in which a society organizes, so a society can also be an economic agent. So a way in which economic agents organizes production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services we can term it as an economic system. We have another definition here. Let us see. We have another definition here. We can use another definition. We just go with three. Let me find it. Do you have it here? So this one doesn't have. So this one doesn't have. So they haven't defined what is an economic system. But remember, when we talk about economic system, refers to the way in which economic agents do what we call production, distribution, and the consumption of goods and service. That one is the easiest definition you can use. So refers to the way in which economic agents or the society do what we call the production, distribution, and the consumption of goods and service. But remember, purpose 3 is to satisfy the needs, their own needs and the needs of the people in most scenario. Now, that one is all about definition of an economic agent. So let us see types of economic agents, economic system, not agents. So we have here, we have three types. So we have only three types. What is wrong with this item? So you only have three types. Here you can see it clearly. So we have three types. We have capitalism, we have socialism, and we have what we call a mixed economy. So those are the three. So in an exam, if they ask you to state any economic system, in an exam, you state and explain any economic system, then you shall state the three of them. So we have the capitalism. Capitalism is also called the free market. We have the socialism, and you have the mixed economy. Let us start with the first one, capitalism. Capitalism, there we have it. Capitalism system. Now, under capitalism system, this one is what we call it free market or free enterprise or laissez-faire. So laissez-faire. So the word capitalism can also mean free market, free enterprise, or laissez-faire. Now, when we talk about laissez-faire, it means other things being constant. But anyway, let us define what is capitalism. Now, capitalism is an economic system where there is no government interference. So it is a private ownership, and there is freedom of an individual or a firm to conduct the economic activity without government intervention. So this one is the definition from here. So we can say it is a system where there is private ownership. So a system where we have private ownership and freedom of individuals and firms to conduct the economic activities without government interference, meaning the government does not interfere with the economic activities of that country. So if a country is practicing capitalism, it means that the prices are not determined by the government. So the prices are determined by the interaction of the people. So how people, so the market itself determines the prices. So there is no government interference. So the government is not there to set prices that this is the price within the market and so on and so on. No. So because of the interaction within the market without government interaction, so the market itself adjusts to determine the demand and supply in short. So the price is determined through demand and supply. So that is all about capitalism as the definition. So, but a good definition you can use when we are talking about capitalism, you can say that this is an economic system where there is no government interference. So that one is correct. So if utakumbuka mambo na private ownership and freedom of individual to conduct their own activities in their own ways, then you can conclude and say that this is an economic system where there is no interference from the government when it comes to determination of prices. So the government does not interfere in any manner. So one of the features, so make sure you remember these other items like free market. In an example, they can tell you to define what is free market. So if they ask you to define what is free market, then you shall define what is capitalism. If they ask you to define what is free enterprise, you shall define capitalism. If they ask you to define referee, then you shall also define capitalism. Let us see their features or characteristics. Now, characteristics number one, we have private ownership. Number one, private ownership. Now, when we talk about private ownership, it means that people own their own production in a private manner. So unapata mtu akona shamba yake kivyake. Yani hiyo shamba it does not belong to the state, it belongs to a person. So kama mtu akona gari, that gari ni yake kivyake. So that is a private ownership. So private individuals and firms owns the means of production and goods in the economy. So ni yako kivyako. So there is private ownership. When talk about capitalism, so few individuals owns factors of production. So few individuals owns factor of production privately. So in a private manner. So remember, private individuals own factors of production in a private manner. So that one is number one. That one is number one. Number two, we have freedom of choice. Anyone can exercise what they want. So there is no government interference. So the government will not interfere with you. So you can exercise what you want as long as it is not something bad. So individuals as consumer are free to spend their money income on goods they consider desirable to satisfy their wants. So under this kind of a scenario, because there is private ownership of property, then if you get income from that property, you have the right to spend on what satisfy your need. So you have the right to spend on what satisfy your need. And that one leads to what we call consumer sovereignty. That one leads to what we call consumer sovereignty. This one you can be asking an exam. You define what is consumer sovereignty. Now, consumer sovereignty comes because of freedom of choice. So consumer sovereignty comes because of freedom of choice. It influences what the producer will produce at any point of time. Now, because of the freedom of choice, you can consume what you want to satisfy. So the government will not be there to control your goods, what you want. So because of that scenario, we shall have what we call the consumer sovereignty. And therefore, consumer sovereignty is a situation where an individual can spend their resources on the desirable goods that will satisfy their needs. So in that situation, we call it consumer sovereignty. And because of that one, it might influence what the producer will produce. So it might influence what producer will produce because of the item of freedom of choice. Okay, let us continue. So another characteristics. So this is another way you can produce. You can define the freedom. The freedom. When I say similarly, a farm are also free to produce any goods they want without government interference. So the government will not control you. So you produce what you are capable of. So without any interference from the government. So there is freedom of production by the farm. So there is also freedom of production. Next, limited role of the government. So we have limited role of the government. So the role of the government in the economy is minimal, meaning they are not there to control anything. So the function of the government are limited to the provision of the enabling environment, rules and regulation for private economic activities to thrive. So the government are there, but on a minimal interference. So they cannot control the private ownership of land. So the government cannot come and take your land. So it is impossible. And if they take your land, they must compensate you. So there is minimal. So there is minimal government interference. Competition. Now, because the government is not there and the market is free, the individual and farm freely compete for the goods and service. So there is competition for the goods and services because the government is not there. Now, we need to compete in order to satisfy our needs. And therefore, there is a lot of competition within the market. So individual and farms freely compete for the goods and services. So kama ni kwa market, so ni wewe unajituma kivyako. So is that you can compete for the goods and services in market. So there is free competition within the market. So there is what we call pure competition. Now, this one is very important. Therefore, in pure capitalism, the fundamental question of what to produce, how to produce, and to whom to produce are resolved by the price mechanism. This one is very, very important. This statement is very, very important. You make sure you write it. Now, how do we solve the fundamental problems? Because at the end of the day, we need to solve the fundamental problem. Which problem? What to produce, how to produce, and to who to produce. Now, that question, that fundamental questions are solved by what we call the price mechanism. Now, when we talk about price mechanism, this is a mechanism where prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply. So make sure you write it that definition. We can be asking an exam. Explain the term price mechanism. Now, price mechanism is a mechanism where prices in the economy are determined by the forces of demand and supply. By the forces of demand and supply. So price mechanism is a mechanism in the market or in the economy where prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply. So if demand increases, what will happen to the prices? What happens when demand decreases? What happens when supply increases? What happens when supply decreases? And so on. So we have that interaction or interplay between demand and supply to come up with an equilibrium. So that equilibrium is what we call so the equilibrium point is determined through the price mechanism. And therefore we're saying interaction between demand and supply is what determines the price. And that is what we call the price mechanism. Now advantages. Number one, one of the advantage, number one of this kind of system is optimal allocation of resources. Now, producers engage in the resources only on goods which appear to yield their profits. Now, come on, individual, now you own your production privately. You can only engage to these activities that will maximize your profits. And therefore, at the end of the day, because una chase the profit, you will end up maximizing your resources. You will end up using your resources effectively. And therefore, that one is an advantage to this kind of a system. Individuals and firms will tend to use their resources effectively in order to maximize their profit. If no, they might end up making losses, and therefore they might be kicked out of the economy. And therefore, an individual doesn't have an option but to utilize their resources effectively in order to have what we call the optimal allocation of resources, this one. So because of the private ownership, so if you don't use your resources well, you might end up losing your resources. Number two, greater output and higher income. Now, hii inatokana kwa sababu ya point number one. Because of the optimal allocation of resources, you might end up producing more output from that resources. And if you end up producing more output and you sell them, you will have more income. And therefore, this one is an advantage to this kind of a system. So there is increased production and productivity, leading to increased income, savings, and investment. But this one comes because of what? Because of point number one. This one comes because of point number one, where we have optimal allocation of resources. So if you allocate your resources well, So if you allocate your resources well, from point number one, it means that you shall have increased production and productivity, and therefore you shall have more income, and more income, more savings, and more savings, more investments. Number three, efficiency. Now, this one will come because of competition. Now, because of the issue of competition, you need to use your resources well. Because if you use your resources in a manner which is not good, and there is competition, your competitors will outdo you because failure to use your resources effectively. Now, the presence of competition will lead to better use of resources. Hence, we shall have what we call the cost advantages. So that one is what we can say about efficiency. So efficiency comes with mostly cost reduction techniques. Now, because of competition, you need to charge your prices in a manner that is attractive to the consumers. And therefore, you need to come up with a strategy on how to use the resources well so that you might reduce the cost. Once you reduce the cost, it means you might end up having what we call efficiency because costs are reduced. Now, progress and prosperity as the last option, as the last kind of advantage. Now, so this one will come up because of what we have been talking about. So it will come up because of allocation of resources well, because of efficiency, and so on. Now, intense competition promotes invention and innovation, thereby bringing economic growth and prosperity. So this one comes because of efficiency and optimal allocation of resources. So if you use your resources well, it means in the future, you might end up having more resources because of utilization of resources in a good manner. Also, if there is a good competition, now because of the competition will lead you, it will open mind. It will lead you to have to be open-minded so that you can come up with approaches that you can do you can improve your commodities and so on. So through improvement and so on, there is that thing which you call progress and prosperity in future, and therefore that will lead to economic growth and prosperity. So as an advantage, so there will be economic growth and transparency. Disadvantages: number one, monopoly. Now, because of individual owning private land, and because individuals are self-centered or self-interest, they will want more and more. And in that process, they might end up being a monopoly. Once they become a monopoly, then it will be a limitation to the economy because other farms, small farms, will not be able to get into the market. So it will lead to emergency of monopoly. That one is not a good idea. So when the government allow people to own farms or means of production individually. So assume that a person owns production, meaning they own uh, they own the raw material within the economy. Now they can decide who will receive that raw material and at what price. So they can hike their prices, and in that process, they become a monopoly, and therefore they end up cutting competition. They end up shutting down small businesses, and in that process, only big farms will emerge in the economy. So that one is not a good idea because small farm will end up shutting down. Number two, we might have inequality problem. Now, many people, we shall have rich people, or rich people having more resources, and poor people having less resources or even no resources. So a country where capitalism is more and more, it means that few individuals own the properties. So the rich people are the few people who owns the production, while the rest of the economy or the rest of the people shall be categorized as poor. They don't own the means of production. And therefore, in that scenario, we shall have what we call the inequality, because some people are rich, some people are poor. So we shall have what we call the inequality. So capitalism alone cannot be a good form of cannot be a good form of a system in an economy. So a good system, we can say, a good system is where we have a mixture of capitalism and another form where there is government intervention. So that we can outdo the problem of inequality, so that we can outdo this problem of inequality. So that one is one of them. That's another disadvantage apart from monopoly. So monopoly tumesema when individuals own property. So and remember, individuals are self-interest or self-centered. Hata kama ni mimi nikiona private ownership, itafika mahali nitake mingi. So the more nataka mingi, the more I'm denying another person to own that kind of a property, because nataka mingi. And therefore, in that process, I will end up having more while others doesn't have. And therefore, I'll be able to dictate what I want in the market. And therefore, we shall have the problem of monopoly. So the poor hawatakuwa na anything to do but to accept the situation. So the problem of monopoly leads to the problem of inequality also. So the problem of monopoly leads to the problem of inequality. The problem of inequality also leads to the problem of inefficient production. Inefficient production. So you might have what we call inefficient production. Reason why? More resources are allocated to the production of. So this one is supposed to be luxurious goods that are desired by the rich. So this one can be, you can also use the word luxurious, or goods which are consumed by the rich people. Now, because of that, we might have what we call the inefficiency production. We are producing for goods which are not that important in the economy. So unapata we are buying luxury goods because of that private ownership or monopoly kind of situation, and we ignore the basic necessity that is required by the people when you are chini. Like for example, this poor people. So because of that one, so rather than distributing the resources to necessity basic commodity, so the providers of capital, that is the capitalist, distribute those resources to luxurious goods. And in that case, then we shall have inefficient production, because at the end of the day, the poor will not receive the basic commodities. So the poor will not be able to receive the basic commodities. So we shall have inefficiency production. Unaenda kwa hospitali, unapata hakuna dawa, because the resources that could have been used to make sure that we have medicine within the hospital has been directed to buy a luxurious product or a good. For example, heavy machines, things like that. And that process, the poor will end up suffering because of lack of the basic necessity. And because of that one, as a person, we might advocate capitalism, but it should not be purely capitalism. It should be accompanied by another form of economic system. Anyway, let us continue. Another disadvantage, it might lead to what we call the economic depression and unemployment. So this kind of a system might lead. So this kind of a system might lead to what we call what we call what? So it might lead to what we call economic depression and unemployment. Now, excessive competition and unplanned production might lead to excess supply. low prices level, and cut in the number of workers in employed. So if we have excess competition, now because of the excess competition within the market, we might have more production. Now, if we have more production, because uh, the individuals, the private individuals might produce more and more within the economy. So if they produce more and more, and because there is no government to control the production, we might have excessive production because the government is not there to control production. So we might end up having unplanned production because of excessive production by the individuals, the few individuals or the few rich people within the economy. So because of that one, if you have excess production, it means that the more the production, the less the prices within the economy. And if the price becomes less, then the companies will not be able to pay workers because they are selling their product at a lower price, and therefore the revenue being received will not be able to cover a lot of expenses, and therefore they might end up reducing the number of the employees. So in that case, we might have the problem of unemployment and economic depression. Remember, economic depression also might be a problem where there is no employment opportunities within the market, or the market is stagnant. There is no any economic growth because there is nothing going on. So those are some of the disadvantages. So we have economic depression and unemployment. So we have insufficient production. We have inequality problem, and you have emergency of monopoly. So those are some of the problem. Kama hujaandika, you can tell me so that you write, but make sure you screenshot in case in case uh, in case hauandiki, make sure you are screenshotting. Okay, before we go to socialism as our next economic system, tulisema tuko na tatu: capitalism, socialism. The other one was the mixed economy, ama the central economy. So before we go to socialism, let us go to this PDF of ours, the other one here. I want us to see something, and we compare our notes. Let us compare our notes. So type of economy. So that is the economic system. So we have the capitalism, socialism. So hapa ameweka mbili. Na ameweka pia communism. Anyway, let us see capitalism wanasemaje hapa. So kwa ile notes zingine tulisema capitalism is a system where there is no government intervention. Where there is no government intervention, and therefore the private people owns the property. So kwa hiyo PDF ingine tulisema is a system where there is no government intervention or government interference, and therefore the individuals owns their property privately. Now let us see this one. So this is the definition. A system, so you can also use this one. A system, this one is an economic system. A system of the economy it's a system of economic organization characterized by the private ownership. Private ownership, that is private ownership of property or production, and the use of capital with a profit motive. Now, so hapa ndio inakujia the word private motive inakujia hapa, because people are owning owning production in a private manner. Ni kumaanisha huyo mtu kama anafanya anything, that person is interested in the profit because ana own private properties privately. So if I'm owning my properties privately, ni kumaanisha for me to have more properties, then I might think on profit motives. That one is the reason why you have the word profit motive. It's because of private ownership of land. So the most important feature of this capitalism, so these are some of the features. Private property. So you have the existence of private property tuko tumesema kule nyuma. So there is existence of private property. So individuals own private property. Now next tuko tumesema freedom to do anything without government interference. So we have another one here. We have freedom of choice. Freedom of choice here. So when you talk about freedom of choice, So you have the freedom of choice, na tukasema kule nyuma, freedom of choice is where an individual or a household or a firm is allowed to do their economic activities without government interference. Without government interference. Then you have the last one, laissez-faire, as another characteristic. Laissez-faire, tulikuwa tumesema pale nyuma. And this is what it means. So this is a definition you can use also. Look at this definition. Look at this definition. So this is the definition of the word laissez-faire. State interference in the economic activity is kept minimum, meaning there is no government intervention. Na nikawaambia that is the definition of capitalism. Kulingana na definition yetu kule nyuma. We said capitalism is where there is no government intervention. So the word state, this one, the word state here means government. So the word state there, so the word state here in Mecca red. So the word state means the government. So tukisema means that the government interference in the economic activity is kept down to the minimum. It means that there is no government intervention within the economy. That one is okay. So we have three properties there. We have private ownership, freedom of choice, laissez-faire. So those are the three kind of definition we can use. Anyway, let us go to socialism. Let us define socialism here before we go to our normal PDF. Let us define socialism. Now, when we talk about socialism, it is an economic system in which the means of production are owned by the state. Now, here the government has the say. Now, in this case, the government has a say. Unlike capitalism, so under capitalism, there is no government interference. For socialism, Nilikuwa nimepotea, nimerudi sasa. So, let's talk about socialism. Where is it? Hapo. So, hey, can you see my screen, bwana? Can you see the word socialism? I hope now you can see the word socialism. Na nikipotea mniambie, nilikuwa nimepotea na msemi. Let me do this. So, amunisikii? Mniambie kama mnanisikia jameni.
Yes, yes.
Okay, let us okay, let us continue. So we are talking about socialism. Now, socialism is an economic system in which the means of production are owned by the state. So here, the state owns the means of production. So the state owns the means of a production. So there is government intervention in short. So there is a lot of contribution of the government within the economy. Now, the main aim of socialism is to run the economy for social benefit rather than profit. Now, remember for capitalism, because it's an individual form of an idea. So remember for capitalism, because remember for capitalism, because it's a private form of ownership of land, there is profit motives. There is profit motive, but because socialism on social benefits, mbona this phone of mine ina katika katika. I don't know what is the problem. Anyway, now because of that kind of state ownership, then the state is there to provide services to the people and not to make profit. And therefore, one characteristic of socialism, number one, is it is state ownership. That is, so it is categorized, it is characterized with state ownership. So there is state ownership when it comes to production. So the state owns the means of production. Number two, another characteristic is that for socialism, the state focuses on provincial of social benefit to the people. So the state focuses on provincial of social benefit to the people and not making profit. So it also emphasizes on equality. So it's also it emphasizes on equality. So that's another characteristics when we talk about socialism. So another characteristics is that it focuses on equality. So there is equal opportunities to every people in the economy, regardless of their class, regardless of their taste, regardless of their privileges. So if you are born in a rich family or a poor family, the state should consider you equally. So kama ni education, all of you will be considered equally to get education. So the tester should be test, not cast. So equal opportunities regardless of the test, class, or the inherited privileges. So inherited privileges ni kama privileges that you get ukiwa kwa hiyo situation because of maybe connection, because someone knows you, and so on. So there should be what we call the equal privileges. Now let us go to our normal PDF and we see if we have these characteristics and what is the definition. Now, in otherwise referred to as command or central plan. So this is another name of what we call socialism. So it is called command or central planned economy. Command. So the word command, it is because of the authority that the government has. So the government has have the authority to dictate on prices, to tax people, has the right to do anything. So wako na power to dictate what they want in the economy, to come up with new rules and regulation and so on. And therefore we call this kind of a system a command system or a central planned economy where everything comes from a central position. So the government is the central. So everything comes from the government. So resources come from the government, they distribute it to the people, and so on. Common rules and regulation comes from the government. So it's a central planned economy. So that one is where this is an economic system where the state owns the means of production. So how about I define? You can write this one if you want, but those are examples of a state-owned what? Not state-owned rather than socialism system. So example of system of socialism system. So we have the Soviet Union, Cuba. So Cuba also practiced socialism. We have a number of Eastern European countries, China, and so on. In Kenya, it is a mixture of socialism and capitalism. So Kenya practices a mixture of socialism and capitalism. So let us see the features and compare what we said the other side. Number one, public ownership. That one is the state ownership. Kwa tumesema kule nyuma. So public ownership, that one is the state ownership. So the state owns the means of production. So public ownership. So the public owns the means of production. Unlike capitalism, the private individuals own the means of production. So here, the government owns the means of production. Number two, public allocation and distribution of resources. So the government allocates and distributes the resources. So the agency or the government agency. So you lazima utaje mahali the government or the state. So you need to wakati una describe this item, lazima utaje the word state or the government. Now, prices of goods and services are fixed by the government. Now, hii unaweza ikiwa kando kama characteristics. Unaona hii? Prices of goods and services are determined by the government. This one can be a characteristics by itself. And then in public allocation and distribution of resources, you can say the government has the power to collect the revenue and distribute it to the people equally. Lazima weke the word equally. So you can describe this one. Public allocation and distribution, you say the government has the power to collect the resources from the public and distribute the resources to the public equally. So the word equally. And then the last characteristics to me here as the last characteristics, and you say that the government has the power to fix prices. So the government fixes the prices. So the government agencies fix the prices. Now, look at this now. The fundamental problem. Now, how do we solve the fundamental problem? The fundamental problem is solved by the government. Now, this one is very important. The fundamental problem is what to produce, how to produce, and whom is to be produced. Now, this problem is solved by the government. The government dictates how to solve that problem. Now, for capitalism, what do we say? Let us see. We look at capitalism. So, for capitalism, let us see here. Look at the capitalism. The fundamental problem is solved by the forces of demand and supply, the market, the 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 forces of demand and supply, the price mechanism. That is the two difference. So the fundamental problem in this part is solved by the price mechanism. That is the demand and supply. So the market itself. So the market autocorrect itself. But this one, for state ownership, the socialism, the problem is solved by the government. So the government dictates the price. So the government wakisema the price of unga ni 200. Now that is even the kutakuwa. So the government wakisema the price of unga ni 300, wakisema the price of 1 liter of petrol ni 300. That will be the price. So the fundamental problem is solved by the government. The government dictates the price. Unlike the one for capitalism, the government does not dictate the price. The government leaves the market to adjust itself through the forces of demand and supply to determine the prices. Advantages. Well, what are the advantages of the government to come in? So what do you think are the advantages? Number one, we have greater economic efficiency. Now, this one is through the government. The government ensures that there is greater efficiency. So how do they make sure that there is greater economic efficiency? Through equal distribution of resources. Through equal distribution of resources. Another advantage, there is no competition because the government set everything. So the government set everything, and therefore there is no competition. So we shall not have a lot of competition within the market. And therefore, dumping of goods and services or use of resources on extensive advertisement campaign is avoided. Reason why? Because the government controls everything. And then we have less inequality now. So under capitalism, we have a problem of inequality because we have few rich people having more resources. But with socialism, the resources are distributed equally, regardless of the taste, class, or the privilege that you have. So the government will transfer the resources to the people equally, and therefore we shall not have inequality. But for capitalism, we have inequality. Reason why? Because few people owns private property. So few people owns private property, and therefore we shall have inequality. But for socialism, we shall have equality when it comes to goods. Okay, let us continue. Let us continue. So those are the two characteristics. Let's go to number next. No monopoly. So if the system adopts socialism, then we shall not have monopoly. Remember, monopoly comes when we have private ownership. But because the government controls the economy, so the issue of monopoly is avoided. That one is advantage to the economy. And therefore, it shall do what? It shall promote welfare within the people because of equality. So no monopoly, no monopoly, and therefore we shall have what we call we shall promote overall welfare within the economy. Now let us see the disadvantages. So we have malallocation of resources. Now resources are allocated on a trial and error and selfish interests of the ruling class, leading to underproduction of goods required by the poor majority. Now, this is the issue. This one is the problem with the government. Now, or the state ownership. Now, the people who are ruling the people. So the people ruling the people, because they also have what we call the selfish interest within them. In any person, akona yo aspect within them. Now, once they have collected, for example, the revenue, now during the process of allocating the revenue to the people, because of what we call the selfishness, they might end up transferring a lot of resources to themselves and then ignoring the people. So that is the problem that every economy or every government faces. So that one is the main issue. That one leads to corruption, bribery, and so on. So because of that reason, we shall have what we call mal-allocation of resources. So the resources are allocated to places where there is no any problem. For example, our make a budget that they want to transfer funds to the marginalized community. Now, but ikifika ni wakati wa kutransfer hiyo pesa, wanakata hiyo pesa. Kidogo inaenda kwa watu, kidogo inaenda kwa mfuko yao. So that is the issue when it comes to the state. So we have the mal-allocation of resources. That is the main problem. That is the main problem when it comes to the state ownership. So that one is the issue when it comes to the state. So the state we tend to do what? So the state we tend to transfer the resources to themselves and leave the poor. Okay, let us go to the next one. Now we have this one, loss of what? Consumer sovereignty. So what do we say about consumer sovereignty? What do we say? What is the meaning of the word consumer sovereignty? Consumer sovereignty, someone? Remember, consumer sovereignty inatokana na mambo na freedom of choice. Remember, tulikuwa tumesema pale juu. Consumer sovereignty comes because of freedom of choice. You can produce what you want. So in that process, if you can produce what you want, you can also satisfy your needs with what you want. So that process of satisfying your needs with what you want is what we call the consumer sovereignty. Now we can define it as a situation in an economy where the desires and needs of a consumer controls the output of the producer. So we can define it as, so let us write it down. So that dictate, siandiki. So I hope utasikia. Let us define what is consumer sovereignty so that ukikutana nayo, usishangae what is that in an exam. So inatokana na the issue of freedom of choice. So freedom of choice, what to produce. So you can produce anything. Now, a situation refers to a situation in an economy. So refers to a situation in an economy where the desires and the needs of consumers controls the output of producers. That one is correct. So the desires and the needs of a consumer controls what is to be produced in the economy. So controls what is to be produced in the economy. Now, because of the government, because the government is there, we shall have that loss of consumer sovereignty. Now, the consumer will not dictate what is to be produced. So the consumer desires will not dictate what is to be produced in the economy, and therefore the government will produce what it feels it is good to the economy. It shall not follow the consumer sovereignty. So consumers are restricted to only the goods and services dictated by the state. So state wakisema hakuna produce unga na the desires of the consumer is to consume unga. So kama the consumer want to consume unga, na the state says we want to produce beans. Now the consumer will not have an option but to consume the beans. So we shall have what we call the laws of consumer sovereignty. Now next, no freedom of enterprise. So remember, for capitalism we said there is the freedom of choice. Now when it comes to socialism, there is no freedom of choice. Now you do what the government wants. So you do what the government wants. In short, it is like you are employed by the government. So it's like you are employed. So if the government controls the economy, it's like you are employed by the government. So you do what the government wants. So there is no freedom of choice. Next, waste of resources. Now, there is a lot of waste of resources when it comes to socialism. Reason why? Because of a lot of procedures in between. So we have complex structures of the government, formalities within the government. So there's a lot of procedures that should be followed before ule mwananchi wa chini afikiwe. Na kabla huyo mwananchi wa chini afikiwe, a lot of resources will be wasted within the process. And therefore we can categorize this kind of a system as waste of resources, as a disadvantage. There is a lot of waste of resources within the government. Then poor quality products. Now, because the government produce these products and there is no competition, so no one is giving the government the competition. So no one is giving the government the competition. So no one is giving the government the competition. And therefore, the government can produce any kind of goods with any quality, poor quality, because they are there to dictate the product. And therefore, we might have what we call poor quality product from the government, because the government might produce poor quality, or they might offer poor quality services or products. They might offer poor quality services or products. So that is all about socialism. Na tumekuwa tumesema hapa pia. So those are some of the items you need to remember about socialism. So let's go to the mixed economy. Then we shall. So mixed economy as our last system. Mixed economy. No, mixed economy is an economy where we have the combination of capitalism and socialism. So like Kenya is a good example of a mixed economy. So tunasema mixed economy. Mixed economy is where we have the combination of both capitalism and socialism. So those two kind of a system operate in the same economy. So if someone asks you to define what is mixed economy, you can give this definition: a system which combines both the future of capitalism and socialism. So in a mixed economy, there exists private and public ownership. So that's another characteristics. So there exists private and public ownership of productive resources. That was number one. In those areas where private ownerships and farms are dominant, allocation and distribution of resources are done by this mechanism. In kama tu Kenya. So in situation where the private ownership is common, then the price are determined by the price mechanism. But in situation where there is more government interference, for example, in things to do with energy, for example, energy, the government determine the prices. So for example, kama Kenya, if we can analyze Kenya clearly, we can see that there are some sectors which is owned by the government, and there are some sectors which are owned by the private ownership. For example, when we talk about energy consumption, as much as we have private sector, there is a lot of government intervention in energy sector. In most cases, energy sector prices are determined by the government. For example, in every 15th day of the month, of each month, inakuanga 15th, IPRA, IPRA is a parastatal from the government, civil. They determine the price of the of the of the those energy products. For example, petroleum, kerosene, diesel. So they determine the price. So in that sector, we can say that it is controlled by the government. So the government intervene in that sector. So they also end up providing subsidies in such sectors so that to make sure that the prices are well maintained. But if you go to other sectors, for example, in production, which kind of a production? Let us see which kind of a production we can say it is mostly private ownership. Now, for example, when you talk about mambo na unga, so unless the government intervene, the price of an unga is determined by the resources in the economy. During the production, the harvesting period, you shall notice that the price of the unga usually drops. But it is not the government who wanna reduce that kind of a price. But during the harsh condition where we don't have a harvesting period, unapata the price of unga imeongezeka. Now, unless the government intervene, so that one is the choice of the government. So the government might intervene or not. If the government intervenes, they might issue subsidies. Now, for example, kama the scenario it happened the other time, mambo na the price of the unga. So the government walitoa all the subsidies of the unga. So before atoe subsidies, the unga ilikuwa inarenjia hapo around 120, 150 hapo, between 120 to 150. So the price of unga ilikuwa hapo. But the government intervened, wakatoa subsidies because they didn't want to intervene so much in that sector. So the price of unga ika hike from between 120 to 150 to between around 180 to around 200 and something, 2 to 10 to 20 to 30. So in that sector, we can easily say that sector can be influenced by the government or it cannot, depending on the circumstances and situations. So it can or it cannot be. And therefore, if the government intervenes, then the government determines the price through giving subsidies and incentives and such kind of an item. If the government does not intervene, then it means the government will leave the market or will leave the market to determine the price. And how does the market determine the price? Through interaction of demand and supply. Through interaction of supply and demand. Through the interaction of demand and supply, in short. So that is what we call the price mechanism. Price mechanism. So price mechanism is a situation where the prices in the economy are determined by the forces of demand and supply. Anyway, so that is the combination of two. Hatukuna haja tuongee sana because it's the combination of two. So look at this one here. Look at this one. Look at this. What are they saying? Let us read it. The state intervention, however, is considered necessary to remedy the defects of the market economy area identified. So it is considered necessary. So if we have an issue that cannot be corrected by the demand and supply forces, then the state comes in. Now, for example, if the state wameacha the price of unga equally determined by the demand and supply forces. Now, after the government waone hapana, this price venye inaenda, it is not good. Maybe inafinyiria the common mwananchi. Now, in that situation, then the government will need to intervene. Okay. Now, how do we solve this problem, the common basic problem? Now, the basic common problem can be solved either by the government intervening or by the government leaving the economy to be solved by the demand and supply. But where necessary, the government intervenes. Where necessary, the government intervenes. So that is how the problem is solved. Anyway, advantages, we have better allocation of resources. That one is through the government mostly. So the government will provide resources to every sector in the economy. And also the capitalism, because of the government intervention, they will end up producing the resources that will be suitable to the economy. Number two, we shall have general balance. So general balance in terms of competition, in terms of allocation of resources, and so on. So we shall have what we call a general balance within the economy. That one is through public participation. We have good competition between the government and the free enterprise. And then we shall have economic growth because of accumulation of capital. So we shall have economic growth because of accumulation of capital. And then another advantage, we shall have a welfare state where there is better allocation of resources to the people. So the government agency protect the interests of the people. So when you talk about the welfare state, remember when you talk about the welfare, when you talk about welfare, we are talking about the people. So the people need to be protected, need to be taken care of. So it is the role of the government. So when you talk about the welfare state, now the government agency protects the consumer interest through various measures and so on. And therefore, the capitalist, the rich cannot take advantage of the poor because the government is there. So even if the capitalists or the private owners have more resources and those resources are distributed to themselves and they end up taking advantage of the poor, then the government is there to correct that kind of an issue. So because of that one, the state protects the need or the interest of the consumer or the common mwananchi. Disadvantages. So we might have no cooperation between private and public sector. So in short, we might have what we call conflict between public and private sector. So because of the two kind of system, so the government dictates the price. The private sector does not want that price. So in that process, we might have what we call the conflict of interest. Not conflict of interest, conflict between the government and the private owners. So the private owners want to charge one unga at 200. The government wants them to charge at 150. Now that one we shall have what we call the issue, the conflict between the two. So we might not have what we call the cooperation between the two in that process. Number two, we can talk about inefficient public sector. Now, mostly public sector are inefficient. So in most cases, public sector are inefficient. And therefore, in that case, the resources can be misused. So hiyo ni kama disadvantage of mixed economy. Not mixed economy, rather planned economy. So inefficient public sector is also a disadvantage to the planned or the mixed economy or the command economy. So in most cases, there is misutilization or allocation of resources. Reason why unapata serikali imetenga pesa, but hiyo pesa inaenda kwa mifuko ya watu. So we shall have what we call the inefficiency. Economic fluctuation also is a disadvantage of this kind of a system. Economic fluctuation. So when we talk about economic fluctuation, it is where we have depression, boom, recession within the economy. So unapata economy may prosper and then ikarudi ikaanguka. For example, kama time ya COVID kulikuwa na economic hardship and then maybe the economy inaanza kufight back, then you have the period of prosperity and so on. So kuna hiyo circle of prosperity and hardship. Prosperity and hardship. Now, The period of economic prosperity and hardship alternating, which are characteristics of capitalist economy, are equally experienced in a mixed economy. This is a result of improper mixture of features of capitalism and socialism. Now, when you don't have a good mixture of capitalism and socialism, so in case there is no good mixture, we might have what we call the economic fluctuation or economic depression. We can also call it economic depression. But a good one is fluctuation, because fluctuation, you can have depression in it, and recession, and boom in it. So that one is a problem. So mixed economy leads to the problem of economic fluctuation. So mixed economy leads to the problem of economic fluctuation, especially where the mixture of capitalism and socialism are not properly installed, are not properly installed, are not properly installed. So those are some of the disadvantages. Functions of an economic system, hii tuna state, hakuna kuongea. This one we are stating because tumezisema kule juu. For example, allocation of resources, that is one of the function, the main function of an economic system. Number two, organizing production. So they are there to organize production, and then wakisha organize production, they are there to distribute production. So now zinajirudia. So they are there to distribute production. So one, they allocate. Once they allocate, they do production. Once they do production, they wanna distribute. Once they distribute, the people consume. Once the people consume, we have economic growth and development. So economic growth and development comes in when we have buying and selling of products. So economic growth comes in when we have buying and selling of products. Now, once we have economic growth and development, then we shall have economic stability, because we shall be producing because we know the market. So we shall be producing because we know the market. So if you want to know the function of economy, you start from the word go, allocation. So allocation of resources. Once you allocate the resources, you transfer the resources to production. Once production is done and you have the product, we distribute the product for resale. Once we resell the product, the people consume it. So the people will keep on consuming. So leo wananunua chumvi, kesho wananunua chumvi. Siku nyingine wananunua chumvi, hivyo hivyo. So kumaanisha chumvi itakuwa inanunuliwa from time to time, and therefore we shall have economic growth in that sector. Once we have economic growth and development in that sector, then because of that routine of buying and selling, we shall have what we call the economic stability. That one marks the end of the function of economic system. That one is the easiest way to understand the function of an economic system. Okay, let us do the last item. Methodology, this one, venye tu iko hivyo. That is the final part of this topic. So methodology of economics. So let me see if you have the normative and okay, we shall also look at positive and normative economics as our last item, and then summary and conclusion. So tumebakisha positive and normative economics na methodologies. Hii hapa. So methodology of economic system. So we have two methodologies. We have scientific method and economic theory. So we have the scientific method and we have scientific method and economic. Let's start with the scientific method. Now, economists adopt scientific method in investigating economic problems and relationship. So we can say, now we can easily conclude and say, so we can conclude and say, let's conclude and say that we can define scientific method as a method. So meaning of scientific method refers to the method of investigation of economic problems and economic relationships. Refers to, so write it down, refers to the method of investigating economic problems and economic relationship. Economic problem and economic relationship. Sawa sawa. So tunasema that it is a method of investigating economic problems and economic relationship. So that's the definition you can use. So the first, the method of investigating economic problems. Okay, let us continue. Now, in this method, problems are identified, defined, information relevant to the problem are collected, organized, analyzed, leading to establishment of economic theory. Now, nataka mkuwe very keen hapa. Nataka tufanye something. I want to tell you something. Now, in an exam, wanaweza kwambia you state steps of scientific method. Explain. Andika hiyo swali chini. Explain steps of scientific method in economics. Scientific method in economics. Write it down. You can find such kind of a question. State the step of scientific method in an economy. So number one, identification of a problem. Number one, identification of the problem. So tunasema explain the steps of scientific method explain the steps of the scientific method in the economy. So step number one, identification of the problem. Number two, once you identify the problem, define the problem. Once you define the problem, collect relevant information about the problem. Once you collect the relevant information about the problem, then organize the information. Organize the information. Once you organize the information, number five, analyze the information. Once you analyze the information, the last item is establish the economic theory. The economic theory from analyze information So in an exam anaweza kuambia state, na hapa tu ameandika, hapa tu ameweka hivyo. So hapa iko tu hivyo. Hauwezi jua kama ni steps. So unaona hapa tu ameweka, lakini huwezi jua kama ni steps. So step number one, you identify the problem. So problems are identified. Once you identify the problem, you define the problem. So step number one, identify the problem. Step number two, define the problem. Once you define the problem, number three, collect the relevant information about that problem. collect relevant information about that problem. Once you collect the information about that problem, organize the information in a particular manner. So organize the information in a particular manner. Then once you organize the information in a particular manner, analyze that information. Analyze that information. Analyze that information. Once you analyze that information, the last step is to establish economic theory from the analyzed information. So the last step, establish economic theory from that analyzed information. So that is all about scientific method. So scientific method is a method of investigating economic problem and economic relationship. Number 2, let's go to economic theory. Economic theory refers to the economic laws, economic principles, and economic models which explain economic behavior. Which explain economic behavior. This is a very good definition. This one is a very, very good definition. We shall use this definition, that it's an economic law, economic principle, or economic model which is used to explain economic behavior. Unaweza acha hapo ama uendeleshe, especially in production, distribution, and consumption. So you can also add. So refers to economic law, economic principle, or economic model which help to explain economic behavior, especially in production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. That is all about economic theory. That is all about economic theory. That is all about economic theory. I don't think there is anything about economic theory that you need to know other than that one. Let us go to positive and emotive economics. Now, limitation of scientific method. Now, the nature of the subject matter of economics, i.e. human behavior, imposes limitation in the use of scientific method in economics. Measurement and control experiments, which are vital in the physical science, are rarely applicable in economics because people cannot be expected to behave as predictably as inanimate matter, which can be subjected to controlled laboratory experiment. Now, I want you to see something here. Now, because an individual cannot be controlled, remember, always is force mtu could behave in a particular manner. Huwezi ambia mtu usiwe unakula chakula, wewe kumwambia out of nowhere. So people, because they behave in different ways, then we shall have the limitation of scientific method because it is very hard to control the behavior of people. So we cannot control the behavior of the people. Now, that is the main limitation of scientific method. So in an example, nakwambia, state the limitation of scientific method in economics. Number 1, you shall say, it is impossible to control human behavior. And therefore, it is impossible to do what? To predict the economy. That one is very, very, very correct. So that is one of the main limitations. So it is impossible. So in an example, state limitation of scientific methods of economics. So number 1, yenye utasema it is impossible. It is impossible to do what? It is impossible to do what? It is impossible to control the behavior of the people in the economy. Number 2, one of another disadvantage, it is difficult to measure and control experiments. So it is difficult to measure or carry out experiments under controlled condition to test hypothesis. That's another one here. So apart from this one, it is impossible to control the behavior of the people. Apart from this one, number two, it is difficult to measure and control experiment. It is difficult to measure and control. So it is difficult to carry out an experiment under control condition to test hypothesis. So I think inakujia mahali hapa hapo. Now under control condition, it is difficult to measure. So under control condition, it is difficult to measure or to test hypothesis. So under control condition, or under control experiment, it is difficult to measure hypothesis, or it's difficult to measure theory. So it is very hard to measure theory. That's what I say. Measurement and control experiments, which are vital to physical science, are rarely applicable in economics. Unaweza fikisha hapo. So unaweza sema hivi, measurement and control experiments, which are vital in physical sciences, are rarely applicable in economics. Ama useme, under control condition, it is difficult to measure economic theory. Under controlled experiment or condition, it is difficult to measure economic theory. So that's another disadvantage. Another disadvantage, andika chini. It does not make moral judgments. It does not make moral judgment. Moral, from the word moral. MORAL. It does not make moral judgment. Now, another disadvantage of scientific method, it does not tell you how to use scientific knowledge. So the method does not tell you how to use scientific knowledge. It does not tell you how to use scientific knowledge. It does not tell you how to use scientific knowledge. I think that one is fine. So that one is okay. So let's go to positive and negative economics. Positive and normative economics. That one will be now. When talk about now, economic analysis can be divided into two. We have the positive economics and normative economics. So economic analysis. So economic analysis can be divided into two. So we have the positive economics and normative. With positive economics. Now, positive economics is concerned with describing and analyzing the way things are or the way certain conditions exist. So this one is concerned with describing and analyzing the way things are. Kitu yenye ishafanyika, for example, mtu akisema the economy is very harsh. So mtu akikwambia akuja aseme the economy is very harsh. That one is a positive economics. It is describe and analyze the way things are. It is describe and analyze the way things are. So akikwambia the economy is harsh. So tunajua already the economy is harsh. So it is describe what is already there. Ama akuja kwambie that the price of unga is 200. Na ukienda kwa market ni 200. So it describes how things are. So it is concerned with describing and analyzing the way things are, things or things will be if certain condition exists. I think iko sawa. So you can also add this one hapa chini. Hapa wanasema, in other words, positive economics is an objective science which provides explanation of the working of the economic system. So the working of economic system. But a good thing, a very simple way to understand what is positive economics is it tends to explain how things are in the economy. It tends to explain how things are in the economy. So it tends to explain how things are in the economy. So in an exam, I kuambia, describe what it means by the word positive economics. You shall say, this is a form of economic analysis. This is a form of economic analysis concerned with describing and analyzing the way things are, or things will be if certain condition exist. For example, unaweza sema, if the government introduce subsidies in the market, the price of the unga will reduce. That one is a positive economics. Okay, let us see another definition here. We have normative economics here. So normative economics. Now, on the other hand, it is concerned with what ought to be, particularly how economics problems should be resolved. Now, this one is focuses on how problems should be solved. Kumbuka ile pale juu tulisema it is focuses on where things are. Yani vitu ziko venye tu ziko kwa economy. Now, for normative, it focuses on how to solve a particular problem. So we can say this is a form of economic analysis which is concerned with what ought to be, what ought to be done. So you can say this refers to an economic analysis that is concerned with what is ought to be done, particularly how economic problems should be solved. So what should be done? What should be done? And remember now this one is a subjective and not an objective. This one is a subjective science. So this one is a subjective science. Tuisome hapo. So it's a subjective science dealing with those areas of human economic behavior in which personal value judgment are made. Normative economics give rise to statements such as money supply should be reduced to lower the inclination what? So money supply should be reduced in order to reduce. Sorry, money supply should be reduced to lower inclination. I forgot the word. Inclination rate in the economy. So that's a good example of what we call a statement, a normative statement. So what ought to be done? So what should be done in order to reduce a particular problem? For example, if we have an issue in the economy regarding money supply, so the money supply can either be increased or reduced in order to solve a particular problem. So that kind of a situation is what we call, that kind of a statement is what we call normative. So that marks the end of normative economics. Now, we have some question here. So I want nani tuanze na nani? Tuanze na Rahab. Rahab, I want you to give me the answer for question 1. Economics can be defined as the study of what? So pick one. Pick one. So the economy can be defined as the study of what? Eh? So what do you think is uh the most uh desirable answer to that one? Because answers zinakaa kuwa zote same. Zinakaa kuwa zote zina make sense. So what do you think is the most? Rahab.
The
Yes.
maybe B.
B. Why
Yeah, though
productive
I'm
resources
not
are
sure.
scarce? Okay. The answer could be A or B. So economic, remember when we talk about economic, we're talking about the scarcity. The resources are scarce. Sivyo. So yes, the correct answer is B. Why productive resources are scarce. So but so that one is the most favorable, and then followed by A. How society solve the problem of scarcity. Now let's go to question number B. The fundamental economic problem facing all the society arises because of what? This one goes to Diana. So what do you think would be the most? The fundamental economic problems facing all the society arises because of. So which is the correct answer? A, B, C, D, or E? Diana? Or Hazel?
Choice A.
C. The correct answer is C. The resources being scarce in relation to human want. So the problem of scarcity is because of the fundamental economic problem. Now, pure capitalism is an economic system characterized by what? That one goes to Moses. So A, B, C, D, or E? Yes, Moses. Moses.
Yes.
Ama Diana. Diana. Okay, Moses.
1 and 2.
1 and 2. What about the 3? What about the competition?
All of them, 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, the correct answer is E. So the correct answer is E. So it is characterized by private ownership, freedom of choice, and competition. Diana, your answer number 4. Which of the following statement is a positive economics? Remember when you talk about positive economics, tunasema, what did you say about positive economics? Yes. So it explains what the way things are. So kwa hiyo statement yote A, B, C, D, and E, which one explain how things are? So it analyzes how things are. So Diana, ama Paul, let us go to Paul. Paul, I want you to give me an answer to that. Which of the following statement is a positive economics? Paul, Paul. So kuna Paul na kuna Diana wajasema anything. Now, anyone else can try. Mwingine ajaribu afu tupeane answer.
Government should tax the rich more.
The government should tax the rich. Ukumbuke hapo kumbuka kuna the word should. So is that the way things are? Should? No,
Yeah,
because
should.
the word should, unaona the word should, that one is not the way things are. Kwa sababu the government should. So toa hiyo haiko kwa sababu should. Aya, jaribu ingine. So the correct answer is D. The correct answer is D. That one is a statement which explain how things are. There is high inflation rate in West Africa. So it's a statement showing that there is inflation rate. So question A, the pump rate of petrol should. That one ought to be. That one is a normative. The government ought, haijafanyika. That one is normative. Anti-corruption agency is desirable. Is desirable. Ni kumaanisha ni desirable. Haiko ni desirable. If ingekuwa, it is desirable. Ought to be. And then ya mwisho, the government should. Haijafanyika. So the correct answer is D. There is high inflation. So that one, so the correct answer is D. That one is a positive. The rest are normative. Number 5, production possibility curve can be useful employed to illustrate. Now, so what do you think is the usefulness of PPC? Yes, Diana? Ama Hazel? Diana amekataa kuongea. All of the above, sivyo?
Yeah.
All of the above, sivyo? So it explains the
Yes.
opportunity cost, it explains scarcity, it explains economic growth, it explains unemployment. You remember we said about unemployment? So mnakumbuka tukifanya swali tukaongelea kuhusu opportunity cost from the PPC tukidescribe economic scarcity, economic growth and unemployment. You remember? So it explains all of the above. Now I want you to give me the answers to this one. So tuanze na Rahab. Give me the answers to question A. Goods that have prices and their production requires scarce resources have a relative use are referred to as what is that kind of a good? Rahab, I'm waiting for your answer. Nikumaliza tunamaliza. So this back question 5. Okay, Rahab akifikirianga, let us go to question number 2. Number 2, this question tuende kwa nani tupatie Hazel. The study of aggregate economics variable is primary concern of. So is it micro or macro? Aggregate. Is it microeconomics or macroeconomics?
Microeconomics.
Macroeconomics, correct. Next one, the economic system characterized by the private ownership of resources. Moses, which is that kind of system?
Capitalism.
Capitalism. Next, the economists who define the economics as a science which studies human behavior as a relationship as end and scarce. Means Kizungu. The economists who define economics as the social science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses is. Wanasemaje hiyo? Najua hata mimi sijaget. What does it means? Wacha tujaribu mtu atuambie. Mtu yote anaweza tuambia if you can understand the question.
Wanauliza
person
huyo
who defines this-
economics.
huyo person mwenye alikuja na hiyo definition. So, do you think come with I define that question sorry, I define economics that way. So nani wajajibu watusaidie. So mwenye alikuwa anatujibia number 1, Rahab, tunangoja answer yako ndio tumalize.
Economic.
Yes, the correct answer is economic goods. So goods that have prices and their production requires cost are called economic goods. Unakumbuka tukisema the first class. Economic goods are goods which have prices in they have price tag. Unakumbuka tukisema they have price tag and they require resources for them to be produced. So number 5, okay, number 4, we can ignore number 4, but that person mwenye alikuja niyo definition anaitwa Leonel Charles Robin. You can search Leonel Charles Robin. So Leonel Charles Robin is the person who defined economics as a social science. Number 5, economic terms for satisfaction and fulfillment that people derive from consumption of goods and services is what? Diana tujibie hii tafadhali, hiyo nayo ni rahisi. Diana ama Paul? Paul? Okay, mwenye anajua tujibie tumalize class. So what is the term which is used when we are talking about satisfaction and fulfillment of wants?
Utility.
So that is the correct answer. Utility is the correct answer. That one marks the end of topic 1. So to remember topic 1, I want to show you something. So I want to show you something. Sijui kama tutapata. Let me try and see if I will get. Then tumalize class. So kuna question niliona, but most of the question from our past paper inatoka from topic 2. So kutoka topic 2 tukisonga mbele mtaona a lot of questions zinajirudia. So last sitting walileta question number 2B. Question number, where is it? Last sitting, tuende last sitting. So last sitting, the only question that appears ni question number 2A. Explain the PPF. Na tukasema PPF ni PPC. There was no any other question regarding topic 1. Only that one. Because question number 3, there is nothing. Question number 4, there is nothing. So number 4, unaona tu ni mambo na demand nini. Hizo ni topic 2. So hakukuwa na anything else. So we can go to question number to the one for December. Let us say for December. Economic planning hiyo tutafanya baadaye. Hiyo walileta kweli any question? Let us see. Mambo tu na demand. Okay, question 6. Question 6A. This one is for April. Look at this question. December 2023. Look at this question. December 2023. Question number 6. Question number 6A. Mtu atusome. Mtu mmoja atusome tafadhali. Ndio nijue mnaona. Question number 6A.
Describe 3 steps involved in the scientific method of studying economics.
Now, hiyo sasa itaweza kulemea. Inaweza walemea. Now, unaona sisi tulipeana steps ngapi? 6. So what you do, unafanya nini? Hiyo step 6 unazicompress. Unachukua mbili. For example, the first 2 ilikuwa identification and defining a problem. Ilikuwa the first 2. So wewe utasema step 1 involve identification and definition of the problem as step 1. Then step 2 una combine 3 na 4. Then ukishafanya hivyo you collect and organize relevant information. Then step number 3 you analyze, then establish economic theory. So iko sawa? Hadi hapo tuko sawa? So what you do, hiyo step zetu tupeana 6, so unachukua mbili. The first 2 inakuwa 1. The that 2 ama hata upeane zote 6 hivyo watakupatia answers, watakupatia marks. So that is question that appeared in April. There was no any other question I guess. Kuna nyingine? Hakuna. Okay, let's go to this one. Look at this sitting. The next sitting. Yeah, look at this sitting. This one is August 2023. Look at August 2023. Mtu mmoja tusome question number one A.
State 5 advantages of a planned.
Yes.
State 5
Okay, yeah.
advantages of a
Planned economy. So hiyo tumefanya. Hiyo iko sawa. I think that one is fine. That one you have the notes now. Okay, let us move on. Let me see if there is another one. Let me see kama kuna nyingine. Let's go to April 2023. Now, what do you think are the benefits of studying economics? Write that question down. Benefits. So April 2023 question number 1B. So kulingana na kile tumesoma, what do you think are the benefits? Tujadiliane tuone kama tunaweza jibu hiyo swali. Wanataka max ngapi? 5. Kumaanisha they want 5 benefits. So what do you think are the benefits of studying economics? Niwape moja. Let me give you one. To solve the fundamental problem. To solve the fundamental problem. To be able. So one is to be able to solve the fundamental problem in economics, i.e., what to produce, how to produce, and to whom are we supposed to produce. So to solve one of the benefits of studying economics is to solve the fundamental problem, the fundamental economic problems in the economy. Is to solve the fundamental economic problems in the economy, i.e., what to produce, how, and when. So iko sawa. That one is one of the problem. Number 2 is to understand aggregate economic. Another way we are studying economics is to aggregate, is to understand aggregate economics. Another reason we are studying economics is to understand and explain the aggregate economic environment. So another reason we study economics is to be able to explain and understand the aggregate economic condition, ama situation, ama environment. So to understand aggregate economic condition, that is to understand macroeconomics. Another reason we are studying economics is to understand how individual behaves in various situations, how individuals behaves in various situations, how individuals behave in various situations. So another benefit is to be able to understand how individuals behave in various. So nimewapatia 3. So hizo zingine 2 mnaweza tafuta. That is fair enough. That is fair enough. Let's go to the next sitting. I think kwa kila sitting wanaenda tu question moja. Can you let us mtu atusome question 1C na 1D? So Moses tusome question 1C, Rahab tusome D.
Question 1C.
Yes.
List 4 characteristics of economic crisis.
Moja tumerudia jana. Scar,
They are
Please?
scarce.
they are scarce. Hiyo ndio one, they are scarce. Hiyo ndio ya kwanza unafaa kuandika. The resources are scarce. Number next, they have price ama cost with them. Sivyo? Sisi tulikuwa tumesema so resources sio free, sivyo? Kumaanisha they are costly. So number one, they are scarce. Number two, they are costly. Number three, they can be used for alternative uses. They can be used for alternative uses. Number four, they have different productivity. Si ni kweli? So number one, they are scarce. Number two, they have cost with them. Number three, they have alternative uses. Number four, they have different productivity. They have different productivities. For example, raw material. Unaweza pata raw material which is a resource inaweza tumika kutengeneza kitu kadhaa. Inaweza tengeneza a particular product, tengeneza product ingine and so on. So it can have different productivity. It can be also used for alternative sources. Ila tulikuwa tumesema kule nyuma, nyinyi ndio mmesahau. So economic resources are scarce, number one. Number two, they are costly. Number three, they have alternative uses. Number four, they have different productivity. Na kuna zingine mtaangalia kwa notes. Aya. Moses, tusomee 1D.
Outline 5 ways in which a government could interfere with the price mechanism.
So we start with what is price mechanism. Now to define what is price mechanism. So someone define for us is price mechanism. Yes. Ama niseme. So price mechanism is a situation where the prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply, meaning hakuna government intervention. Now, how can the government interfere with the price mechanism? The most common ni gani? Nimekuwa nikisema ile mambo ya unga. So for example, unga ipande bei and then serikali ione hapana, wananchi wanafinywa. Nini serikali inaweza fanya ndio wapunguze unga hiyo bei? Yes, hakuna hata moja mnaweza jaribu. Asema kwa exam.
Goods and services.
Yes.
The government can provide goods and services that are costly or are limited in the economy.
The government. Now, for you to answer this question, let me give you a good way to answer this question so that you correct all the marks. Number one, so how does the government interfere with price mechanism? Number one, imposing tax. Now, if the government impose tax, the price will increase of commodity. So that will interfere with the price mechanism. Sio kweli? Yes?
Yeah.
So that one is number one, imposing tax. Number two, offering subsidies. So if the government offers subsidies to a particular product, that product will be cheaper. And therefore it will interfere with the demand and supply forces. Ukweli ama uongo?
Ukweli.
Then we have price control. We can also add price control. Price control is where the government dictates the price. So wanasema we shall charge this price. So government ikisema ni 200, even if demand is high, the price will remain 200. So that is price control. So the government sets the price. So that is price control. So that's another way the government can interfere with the price mechanism. So price control. And then ya mwisho, so they can come with policies, other policies like minimum wage policy, ama regulation. So let's look at regulation policies. Regulation. So the government can come up with regulation and the policies to interfere with the prices. So nimewapatia 4. So nyinyi mtafuta ngapi? Moja. So that is all. I think that one is all. Question number 3A. Can you answer question number 3A? Number 3A. So hapa kwa exam inabidi umefikiria. So mtu atusomee question number 3. Rahab, read for us. This will be the last question tunafanya. So Rahab, tusomee swali ama watu walitoka online after nimeanza kuuliza maswali.
3A.
Ehe.
Enumerate factors that could limit consumer sovereignty.
Yes. So what is consumer sovereignty? What did you say about consumer sovereignty? What is consumer sovereignty? Tulikuwa tumediscuss something to do with consumer sovereignty. Sovereignty is where the production is determined by the desires of the consumer, sivyo? So the production is determined by the desires of the consumer. Now, so what do you think could limit consumer sovereignty? So hiyo ni yenyu sasa, that's your assignment. So assignment is this sitting. December 2022, question number 3A. December 2022, question number 3A as your assignment. So that marks the end of our class. We meet another time. We meet another time. So good night. Goodbye.
Likewise.